serious. People who have survived a murder attempt by dumb luck. What's your story? My dad was a meth addict. He did lots of fucked up things, dropping me off at trap houses to have sleepovers with other coke babies, living in a house full of animal shit and hoarding. He sicked his pit bull on a black child. He was a real fucking character. One night he came looking for my mom and I at our place. Mom wasn't there. Grandma was babysitting me. I was sleeping in bed when somebody started to try and open my window. It was locked, but they kept jamming something into the bottom to try and force it open. At the same time, I heard the living room door being tried by somebody else. My grandma snuck into my room in her nightgown, apparently woken up by the same thing, and told me say nothing. Don't even whisper. We laid under my bed while a group of men shouted for my mom to come out, slammed their hands on the windows to try and break them, and jumped on my grandma's car. She called the police and barely whispered into the phone. Eventually the cops arrived and the men scattered. Long story short, my dad and his other meth head friends came to the house with guns and knives with every intention to kill me and my mother because she was going to get custody of me. If my mom wasn't so vigilant with locks, we had 3 different kinds on the front and back doors, we would have died. My husband and I live above our place of business. An alarm company called us at 3 a.m. to say there was a motion detect alert, just one, in a weird place. We assumed it was a mouse but went to reset, check it out. Husband ended up face to face with a burglar who was on his way out the window he had broken. He ran back inside. I called 911 and we heard mad chaos going on in the depths of the building. So much crashing and smashing. Burglar monkey climbed a 10-foot iron gate, bodily smashed through 2 sets of commercial-grade glass doors and was outside again. My husband was like, yeah, fuck this dude, tore after him and tackled him. He got him on the ground and pinned him. Bear in mind the whole time I'm narrating to 911 and chasing around in panties and tank top. I was a bit behind my husband, in the middle of the street about 15 feet away when a minivan squealed around the corner. It was his GF getaway driver. I luckily missed it. I was super focused on reading the license plate, which was one of those cutesy font out of state ones and therefore hard to read, but she yelled, "Get the fuck off him or I'm running your bitch over." Then she tried to. The audio and video I had to watch for the trial was horrifying. I had blocked it out nearly completely, and really didn't remember how close it was. She guns the engine at me. I throw my hands up in front of my face when I realize what she's doing and scream, and jump out of the way with inches to spare. He jumped in and off they went. He bled all over my husband, yikes, and eventually the DNA and the partial plate info nailed them. They're both in prison. Addendum, trials suck. I got jumped by 2 grown men when I was a freshman in college. I was walking back from my friend's house and it was about 30 past midnight. One posed as a homeless man asking for $1 and the other had on a security jacket like he worked for the university's safety patrol. When I passed the homeless guy saying I had nothing to give him, I saw the security guy walking towards me. This is when I felt the rear neck choke hold and the security guy started wailing on me. I had my bag on me, but like I said, I literally had nothing on me. They couldn't take me down to the ground. Surprisingly, I must have had an adrenaline rush. The guy posing as a homeless guy said, "Open the backpack, find anything, let's dip." This lasted about 2 to 3 minutes, but it felt like forever. The whole time I could feel something pointy in my back, but I just like to think that the guy was extremely excited, and it wasn't a knife. Luckily, it was right outside my friend's house and a couple of them came running out when they heard the commotion. The guys fled immediately when 3 of my friends came sprinting towards them. I still look behind me when I walk home alone. When I was a kid, I was riding my bike home from a friend's house at sunset. I rode past the community pool which had been closed for a couple months. There was a car in the lot with a guy in it. I didn't think much of it as I continued the trek home. I cut through the local elementary parking lot which has gates. I get like 20 yards past the gate and I see that car pull up at the bottom. thinking that's odd. Anyhow, he backs out away from the gate. My spidey senses were kinda tingling at this point. I get up to the school and head towards teacher parking lot, which is my standard direction. As I'm about to turn the corner, I see headlights from the parking lot. I stop and peek around the corner, and it's that fucking guy again. I flip my bike around and start going the long way around the school. He sees me but just gets back in his car and starts driving around the front of the school. I camp in these bushes, heart pounding. He is slowly driving up and down the front of the school, keeping an eye on the teacher's lot. Another car comes down the street, and he has to move his dumb car out of their way. As soon as he does, I just blasted up to the street and full tilt flew my bike into some random open garage. So I'm hiding in the garage waiting for him to come around again. But he doesn't. I give it a few minutes, then decide to pop my head out. Still no one. Okay, I'm a few blocks from home, just gotta go for it. Bust out the bike and start hauling ass home. Not half a fucking block later, this dude turns the corner on me. I just veer my bike into some random lawn and run up to the front door. I look at him and he's just in the street staring at me. I grip the front door handle, praying to any and every god these people don't lock their doors. I see his reverse lights flicker and I know he just put it in park. I just rip that door open, run inside and slam it. Two old people just sitting there. I look at them and I'm like, some dude is trying to get me out there. They don't completely believe me cause they barely react to what I said. But they don't kick me out or anything either. I'm watching the dude from their window and he's just chilling. Then the grandpa-looking dude gets up from his lazy boy and opens the curtain to look for himself. When he does this, the asshat in the car just leaves. Old guy's like, well, looks like he's gonna leave. I'm like, I'm not leaving for a bit. So I hang out for 10 minutes and no creepy abductor car to be seen. I assume he figured I called the cops. Finally, I'm like, I have to get home. This is before cell phones were common for average people. I hop on my bike, and I swear it felt like I drove 35 miles per hour the whole way home. Get home and tell my parents. I'm exhausted and in complete shock. They basically brush me off. I'm stunned that every adult I interacted with acted like I was crazy. I basically never talked about it again. It was so traumatic to talk about at the time. That image of him in his car while I held the door handle to the random house is permanently seared into my brain. To this day it's still as crystal clear as if it happened yesterday. Like 18 to 20 years later, I decided to confront my parents as to why they didn't do anything that day. They were like, WTF you talking about? I explained it far better than I could have when I was a kid in complete shock. Anyhow, with the current, more expansive explanation, my mother BBB broke down. She started crying at this public restaurant cause she saw how serious I was when I was like, how could you ignore what I said that day? As well as talked about how that morphed my stranger danger techniques for better or worse. Thankfully, I was on the verge of puberty and ended up becoming a giant human being, so my actual fears diminished quickly as I could defend myself. Until I moved away from that town, however, I looked every day for that goddamned car. Never saw it again. I would fantasize about what I'd like to do if I ever found that guy. Hell, I still do. Serious. 3 men drugged me and kidnapped me. I woke up on a floor with one of them tearing my clothes off and my moon boot broken foot. I tried kicking him off with the boot, but he started knocking my head into the floor and I passed out. I woke up in daylight in a garbage bin, naked and in a pool of my own blood. I don't know how the fuck I got out of there or how I found the nearest policeman, but I then collapsed again. Woke up in a hospital with 52 stitches in my head and 78 in and around my vulva and breasts. Doctor said it was the worst rape trauma she ever saw. They say it's a miracle I'm alive and don't know how I did it. They were never caught. I am a crisis, trauma and PTSD counselor. Serious. I had a guy high on both meth and acid break into my apartment in college. Somehow he was convinced he lost his glasses inside. I am doing dishes when my door gets slammed open. Next thing I know, he is behind me. I am being choked to death in my kitchen. As I was losing consciousness, I grabbed my roommate's acrylic bong and frantically swung over my shoulder into his face. The bong broke but did nothing as the guy was choking me even harder. So I swung it again. Because the bong broke the first time, I was hitting the guy with a 6-inch claw of acrylic glass. Afterward, his scalp and part of his cheek were hanging off the side of his face. Essentially, I scalped him with a bong. So I chased the guy out of my house. There is easily 2 feet of snow outside. He tries walking back to his house through a cemetery as a shortcut, seriously faced with tears of joy. And he passes out in the cemetery. The police only found him because I called the cops and they followed the blood and footprints through the snow. And that's the part one was surprised about the most. I hit the guy on his scalp. There isn't much blood in a scalp compared to most the body. But my kitchen was covered in blood. His blood was on my refrigerator, counter, floor and ceiling. It was almost as traumatic to clean it. My roommates were gone for winter break. Thank God my roommate's girlfriend came over and helped me. Now as for the guy. The cops couldn't charge him for 2 days because he needed blood transfusions. He was charged with assault, breaking and entering and attempted murder. Not sure what he got convicted of, but he went to jail for 4 years. My sister had this one friend when we were growing up I always got a bad vibe from. She would try to pick on my little brother but I would always stop her. I was 8, she was 10. Once we were at a lake and all the kids were swimming. I swam out to the deep roped off part but I was still little and really shouldn't have. She kept acting weird and getting closer to me, making this weird laugh. She pushed me off the wooden pole in the water and I got scared and started to swim back, but she came up behind me and pushed me under the water. It didn't click at first that she was trying to drown me, but after she aggressively pushed me under the 3rd time I had this crazy moment of clarity. It was like the world slowed down ever so briefly. I relaxed and let myself sink, swam underneath her, and came up behind her. I grabbed her hair and shoved her face into the water, keeping my legs on her back so her body couldn't rise. I waited until her struggling slowed down and let her come up. I waited in the water saying nothing, bracing myself for her retaliation, but she just looked panicked and swam back to shore. I told my sister, who had already expressed that the girl was weird. We confronted her together and she just looked really dazed. In a monotone voice she said, "I'm sorry, I didn't know it would be like that." It wasn't until I replayed those words in my mind later that I realized what she was saying was, "Sorry I tried to drown you." It wasn't until I was almost drowned myself that I realized how horrible it is to do to someone. I was exiting a bar once after last call and was with a friend who was a medic. We saw a girl laying in a snowbank near a telephone pole who had just been hit by a car. We ran over and tried to help her. Some others were already on the phone with 911 and I, not having any medical training, didn't have anything to contribute but didn't want to just leave. The whole situation was concerning. I turn around for a second and start to hear people screaming. I turn around. A minivan was heading for us, the few people around this woman. They already started to run, but I was too late. He hit me as I was trying to flee, put the car in reverse, ran over me again, and then went forward and run over me a 3rd time. Turns out the guy was high and drunk and got into a fight with the women's BF, whom I bared a strong resemblance to. He thought I was him. Not to throw a pity party for myself, but 9 years later I have a ton of medical issues, and my life pretty much started on a downward spiral since then. But sure, I guess I survived. When I was 2 weeks into my first job as a 16-year-old, at a smoothie establishment that should be known to NBA fans, we were robbed. It was late, and my coworker's friends had been playing pranks on her all day, so when I saw someone burst through the door, I thought it was just that. Until, that is, I had something metal pressed against my back and an arm wrapped around my chest. The robber gave the whole stereotypical, "give me all the money" spiel, and ordered us to go into the back room, kneel down, and face the wall. As I was kneeling and hearing him walking towards us, time seemed to slow down. Thankfully, I had been refilling juices whenever he came in, and so the door to the back room was partially blocked by a heavy cart. With whatever substance he was on, he wasn't coordinated enough to get past it to us, so he fled. He was followed by my coworker's husband and caught. When he was caught, they found an industrial-sized pipe wrench wrapped tightly in his fist, so that he could get a stronger grip when swinging. I'm so glad that cart was there. Once a year or so, I would look him up in the parish prison roster to see if he was still in jail. One year, he suddenly wasn't. I later found him named in a lawsuit as having stabbed his cellmate a half-dozen times while the guy was asleep. Definitely doesn't seem like the nicest of people. 9 years later, I'm still unpacking this incident in therapy. It's why I don't like walking around cities at night or sitting where I can't see the door. I was out with a few friends, and with us was a girl that had just broken up with a psychopath. We didn't know he was a psychopath. We found out that night. We were just walking back home from a restaurant. It was about 1 a.m., and the guy came running out of nowhere. I don't know how he knew where and when to meet us. He ran to the girl, lifted her shirt up and stabbed her in the gut, literally splitting her belly open like a fish, and then ran off. This whole thing happened really quickly, so we were all in shock. The girl was holding her own intestines in her hands, and she was so shocked that she didn't even seem scared, wasn't screaming or anything. She just stood there. We called an ambulance and they managed to somehow put everything back and sew her up. This happened about 3 years ago, and she still has pretty serious problems with her digestive tract, can't eat certain things and that kind of stuff. That image of her just standing in the middle of the pathway holding her own guts will remain stuck in my head forever. The guy got 13 years in jail, by the way. In my late teens, I used to buy my weed from random dudes in the projects, low-income housing. One day we gave some money to a guy named 40. He took it and went inside one of the buildings. We waited in the car for several minutes. We started to think he had taken our money and left. Right about that time, a car full of coked-up white dudes pulled up beside ours. Apparently my friend owed them money. They pointed a gun at him and said that if he had enough money to buy weed, then he could pay them back. I really thought they were going to shoot us and just drive off like it was nothing, and I hadn't even done anything wrong. I thought I was gonna pee my pants. Right about that time, 40 came back out with our weed and an even bigger gun. He scared them away, and then we went back to his apartment and smoked a blunt. What a good man. Turns out he was only selling weed because he had a 6-year-old daughter, and that was the only way he knew to give her a better life than he had. I babysat his daughter occasionally for the rest of that summer. I really hope she got a decent childhood and that her dad stayed safe and out of jail.